Hello and welcome to another Nimble video tutorial. In this video tutorial, we're going to continue looking at my new full stack Node.js server support for the Nimble IDE. But before we get into the normal dialogue of these videos, I want to point out a couple cool articles I found online you might want to check out. 20 best practice for improving JavaScript performance. Having a conversation with a colleague that I currently work with, he mentioned one of his biggest fears or gripes with JavaScript is NPM. And I tend to agree with him. NPM allows JavaScript developers to just import as many packages and libraries as they want. And the next thing you know, after they've NPM themselves to death, they've got an application that's 9 meg long and runs very, very slow. I'm pretty meticulous about the libraries that I use. I analyze them, I check them out pretty well before I decide to incorporate them in any of my personal projects. And that's not just because I don't want the bloat, but out of respect for my project as well as the code of other people's. I don't want to use or absorb a library that's going to be detrimental to my project. That being said, I found a really cool article on solid principles design and how it can apply to JavaScript. If you're not familiar with solid, it's pretty straightforward. It's a single responsibility, open and close principle, list calls substitution principle, my personal favorite, interface segregation principle, and dependency inversion principle. As I go through these videos, you will notice that I followed most of these philosophies of design in my creation of Nimble. I'm a thorough believer in it. There's a great video on InfoQ about solid JavaScript. If you want to check it out, feel free. So without further ado, we're going to get into the Nimble server Node.js support feature. My last video, I gave you a look at the basic diagram of the server design. Today, I'm only going to focus on the DBI database interface module. This is the layer that I use to abstract database support from the server itself. I chose Loki.js, which is a lightweight JavaScript in-memory database design. The querying syntax is very similar to MongoDB. MongoDB could be used in its place. But with this interface layer, I was able to use the syntax of a MongoDB for doing CRUD operations and add a conversion layer to build SQL statements to allow you to read and write data to any database. It's not 100% complete, but there is a migration feature so that any CRUD operation that you've done using a Mongo or Loki.js database, you can simply use the migrate method and it will migrate them to any regular SQL Server or Oracle database. The final feature I'll be adding in that DBI layer is, of course, to support store procedures for SQL Server and Oracle packages. The thing about server, Node.js and server design is not sexy. It's a lot of code. You're going to see a lot of black screens as terminal windows run, but I'm going to try to keep some of these videos inside of the IDE so that you can see some of the eye candy that I'm so proud of. This is the DBI layer. Pretty straightforward. It basically uses a file system, Loki.js, and I currently have written the port for MySQL as a database layer. I have an import-export features for just loading and saving any JSON files that I may need in tables. These 4 functions are the magic that allows it to transform between a MongoDB syntax query to a standard SQL query. It builds a SQL string based off of these functions, and then your exported methods that I guess form the interface that any database or you can use within your server backend application. As I said, the migrate and convert. The convert feature takes these 4 CRUD operations and allows you to go between Mongo to SQL the migrate feature I was adding will migrate a full table or a series of tables in your backend. A pretty straightforward design. So let's take a nice look. When you build a blank Nimble project, you before would always have the client project, which is your front end, and now you get a new folder for the server project. By right-clicking on the server project, you get a nice pop-up menu that allows you to add a server, remove, run npm install, and then start the servers if necessary. Under the add option, I've offered 3 types: a blank Node.js server, which is bare minimum, a Node.js setup, a single instance server, which includes a few of my libraries for string manipulations and file system support, and then of course the full multi-instance that I gave you the demo of that can spin up, well, it's projected to spin up about 2,000 instances of a node if necessary, but it's a repeated self-aware node network. So today I'm just going to bring in a single instance server. It tells you the server prototype has been added to the project. Now when we open up the folder, we get a home server, a modules folder, which just has the util strings and like a config or info file, and then the actual server.js. I'll look at the utils file first. If we look at the utils file, basically this is my abstracted layer for a file system. Everything about Nimble, including using the file system, has been abstracted out with an interface, and that's part of one of the segregated interfaces. It's part of the solid principles. Some of the things that I really hold on to. I did this because if I use the file system, the FS file system, directly in my project, and something changed, I knew when I started working on Node.js, they were talking about deprecating the use of synchronous processing in the file system. So if I use a lot of FS sync throughout my app and they deprecated that functionality, I would have to go through my entire application, which is hundreds of thousands of lines of code, and change all of my FS synchronous commands to use callbacks. And that would be very uncomfortable for me. So I abstracted that the use of the FS file system inside this single utility function, and it's only used once. Every time I need to copy a file, make a folder, anything that has to do with the file system, I use my library. If something changes with the production of FS or the file system provided by Node.js, I only have to change it in one place, and it will keep my entire application running. I've abstracted just about any dependency on someone else's code through this method. So that keeps my application safe. If I collapse the project and start looking, you'll see it's just a basic, any type of, if I want to know the download path, picture path, temporary path, any type of the size of a file, deleting a file, renaming a file, copy files, all of the basic functions you would do on your file system, I have abstracted. This server, which I'm going to spin up for you in a minute, is like a basic single server with 2 endpoints, or 3 endpoints, I'm sorry. It has a ping, get data, and put data. I have just a fake JSON object that when you select the get data object or the get data endpoint, it will return a fake quiz of mass questions JSON object back to you from the server. After you have this server installed, if you know anything about Node.js, the first thing you have to do is upgrade and import any libraries. But I've made that simple directly from the server project. You right click and say run npm install. A bunch of shell commands will start up as it starts to pull in any of the dependencies from Node.js to make sure that your server will run. It does this in 3 of the folders: the server folder, the modules folder, and the plugins folder, if there are any files there. In this case, it's really just server and modules that are for this single instance server. Once all the npm work is done, we can spin this guy up. Start the server, gives you a confirmation It does not close out any pre-started servers, and you'll see you're listening to the local host on port 3000. As I said, this server is running. It will return a JSON object, and to verify that within the Nimble IDE, we can test it. If we look at localhost port 3000, that's where it's listening, and we use the command get data. We send that to the server, and we get the JSON object back. Quiz, sports, the questions and answers. That's all provided within this mock server implementation. Like anything, this server is up and running and prepared to be used, or modified to whatever project that you want to use it for. I did put console log so that you can see that data was sent, and it was sent to the Nimble IDE. That was just a quick look at the first implementation of the nimbleJS server support. Within this IDE, I also included the ability to remove the entire server implementation, run npm prune, npm shrink wrap. You can, of course, launch a shell into any of the folders that use npm, and you will see once you've run npm install, you have a node modules folder. This is where any dependencies and libraries are copied. Basically, that's all I've got for you today. Full stack implementation, full stack support, the Nimble IDE. You gotta love this stuff. Thank you for watching.